Their promises are not worth anything. The value of the Naira is even much more than the value of INEC promises. That's why you have to invest yourself in the process of authenticating all claims.
So I was earlier on AIT where we discussed INEC, electoral processes and all of those. And it was quite an interesting conversation by my perspective. And then from some of the feedback I got from the people who watched it live, I would love for you to really watch to the end because I made some far-reaching recommendations. And then after that, give me your feedback.
Hello and thanks for staying with us. This is Focus Nigeria. My name is Amechi Anopwe. Now, since independence, elections in Nigeria have been characterized by manipulations, leading to huge loss of credibility. This, no doubt, have posed existential threats to the country. Reforms of electoral laws and processes have been achieved, but the success have always been limited and erratic, except for a few elections, such as the June 12, 1993 presidential election and that of 2015, where an incumbent lost the election. Most polls in Africa's biggest democracy have been fraught with irregularities. That of 2023 presidential election and the November 11 off-cycle governorship elections in 3 states of the Federation fell far short of expectations. On our discourse today, we shall continue with examination of threats to Nigeria electoral democracy and ways this could be dealt with. Thank you so much for staying with us. And my guest is here with me, Chima Christian, public affairs analyst, and has been at the lead of advocacy for good governance in Nigeria. He joins me today to take a look at our electoral system, an electoral system that is continually begging for reforms. We see reforms in some aspects in terms of the electoral law, in terms of processes, introduction of technology, but it appears that the desired effect have not been achieved. Our elections are prone to manipulation. We see the introduction of vote trading, and of course, we see violence being used to win election, being employed as strategy. And so many people believe if we don't take the right steps in dealing with this problem, it could lead us to a destination we wouldn't even want to get to. And so on our discourse today, we'll continue that search for a credible electoral system that will truly express and indicate the wishes of the people whenever it's time to vote. Chima Christian, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
So do you share the concern that indeed we are on a wrong journey? We are on a journey in the wrong direction and there's need for a pullback.
I believe, yes, we've had a setback in 2023, but if you look at it at the whole gamut of the elections, you see that Nigeria has made substantial improvements in election management. For instance, if you go from the time of outright annulment in 1993 to rigging by ballot box snatching in 1999, 2003, we've made quite substantial improvements. And then today you now find a situation where if you wanted to rig elections, you may want to hire a few senior advocates to go to the Supreme Court to attempt to snatch ballot boxes for you. So you see that that's improvement. Although you're not improving in the substance, but you're improving in the ability or the technical capacity of the opponents to compromise the wishes of Nigerians.
Improvements made in various aspects, but it appears the criminally minded are faster in terms of reaction and being ahead. You plug this hole, they create a bigger hole elsewhere.
Well, because we've not been trying to plug the holes before the elections, what we try to do is to wait until the elections happen and then we play catch up. For instance, you know that discussions about electoral reforms are now on in Nigeria. Who are the people leading these discussions about electoral reforms? They are the same people who routinely and brazenly steal elections from us. So if you allow your opponents to write all the laws, there are 3 sets of documents governing elections in Nigeria. One is relevant sections of your constitution. The second is the Electoral Act. But the third, and what I consider even more insidious, is the electoral guidelines issued routinely by INEC. And I believe
for the conduct of the election.
For the conduct of the election. So I believe now that it is time for Nigerians, especially opposition political platforms and then civil society groups, to begin now to critically examine those 3 documents arguments with a view for suggesting alternatives. You don't want to allow your opponents to write all the laws, and which is what we do. And for instance, those people who are planning to run in 2027 will sit back and allow people to write the laws and insert the loopholes there because they are deliberately created. For instance, the laws you have now acknowledges the use of electronic devices, but then there is a backdoor that the devices are at the mercies of INEC to choose to use or not. But if you had people who critiqued those laws as at the time they were passed, and people would have made it a point of law that is outrightly illegal not to use those things. So these loopholes are deliberately planted by people who want to manipulate the system. And when the people who indeed want to keep the system clean are not investigating or investing as much energy into the system, then that's where you have these lapses. And you don't want to leave the elections and the electoral ecosystem only to complain after the elections. Every intervention you do about the electoral system is before the elections. Once the election is done, you can only submit yourself to the court system.
You said those driving it are not supposed to be at the driver's seat. These are the lawmakers. If you want to amend a law, expunge, repeal or reenact, it has to go through the National Assembly.
Then when you get to the National Assembly, for instance, laws mustn't start from there. That's the only instrument that legalizes ideas, right? But ideas shouldn't start from there. You have your eggheads, you have your people who are interested in developing Nigeria, sit down, analyze those laws, and tell you the weaknesses of these
The civil society organizations,
the civil society,
are they doing that?
Well, some are. Let me not use it, but some of them are interested in snapping pictures, for instance, with the INEC chairman, and then going back to their funders to say, oh, we engaged with the leadership of INEC. And so because you have that civil society in Nigeria are not funded by Nigerians, and that's a big problem. Civil society in Nigeria are funded by foreign NGOs who have different interests. And they have, for instance, some activities of NGOs are not geared at solving the problem. They just want to create activities and actions around the problem. And so it's time now that Nigerians will begin to fund credible individuals and credible platforms to start building alternative civil society systems. Your traditional civil society systems is crumbling, not just...
When you say Nigerians funding them, is it Nigerian businessmen, Nigerian foundations? How many do we have?
We have a lot. You see, for instance, Indimi went to your Indimi, you know him, went to universities. You don't know how much Nigerians have. And Nigerians in diaspora pour in a lot of money into the system. But you see, people have to deliberately invest in things like this, in media, in civil society actions. But when you allow Bill Gates Foundations, Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, these are foundations. They are germane in what they are doing, but sometimes they have different interests outside of the national interest because no one can take care of you more than your very self. And so if you allow these people to, for instance, today, the topical issue that people are now talking about is climate change. And you see a lot of activities around climate change. I think there's one coming up either today or tomorrow around climate change. And people are funding climate change. And you ask yourself, climate change is germane. But climate change is now the appetite of funders.
Is it Nigeria's priority?
It is not. So, but when you take your ideas to them and they tell you we're only interested in climate change, you either have to get interested in what they're interested or you go and look for funds.
So the Indimi you mentioned, I know of T.Y. Danjuma, there are so many, the Health Foundation, so many of them.
So many of them.
You want them to
start looking for
channel more funds to
inwards, and then not just the big names, because Nigerians can contribute money in their trickles and clusters. Find credible individuals, find credible people, not just any charlatan on the street, who are already working on those thematic areas that you know are germane to the health and the cohesiveness of the society, and begin to ask, how can you help? How can we help? But if you allow civil society funders, these are primary people whose only work is to fund civil society. When you bring in your idea and you say, this is what I want to do, I need X, Y, Z. Before they fund this, your idea has been watered down, that you are left with mere actions and activities. And then they say, oh, we can't fund this, we want to be. So they are funding the peripherals, and they don't want to strike at the core issue because they don't want to disturb.
So in the absence of a strong civil society to generate this momentum, where is the way out? What is the way out?
Robust
the media is there,
opposition.
But you know, the politicization of the media and all that.
It's quite unfortunate, but the media has also lost its bearing. You know, at some point, you guys bragged about being the fourth estate of the realm. I don't think you're even in the first 10 now, the way it is practiced in Nigeria. And it's a telling judgment on Nigeria's media. And then you will give it to platforms that are credible, and we can find those credible platforms, including yours. And I'm not saying this to flatter you. Then there are other platforms that are also credible. But now, you see that the focus of Nigeria's media is a little bit different. And then you see that the working environment has also not let journalists do their very best for the country, perhaps because of the way they are entitlements, benefits are structured. You don't find them. And then you see that a lot of the activities leading to the nation has to be proactive, not reactive. What the media tends to do is allow things to happen. For instance, we've been working on the census. Nigeria census will come up between the first quarter and the second quarter of 2024. And we've been working on the census. I've talked to my media partners, I've talked to people. Let's discuss the census. They say, no, Chima, that is not the topical issue now. We will allow for NPC to do something. And when they do something, we can now smuggle you in 15 minutes or 5 minutes to react to what they did. You know that there's a major national exercise. The major national exercise is about to be bungled. And you don't want to discuss it until it happens. You now call us to start crying on your TV. So that's not what you want to do. You want to have a media that is proactive, media that is setting a template, not media that is following the government, but media that is ahead of the government. Nigeria's media today is behind the government, is behind the key players. Nigerian media,
that should set agenda.
Should set agenda, but you don't wait for things to happen and then you start calling people to react. You set agenda. This is what we want to achieve. How do we achieve it? You design programs to achieve that. Today, Nigerian media is not interested in that. Nigerian media is in eternal pursuit of trends, eternal pursuit of trending and topical issue. And you allow the politicians to determine what trends. You allow the society to determine what trends. And then you run towards that because you're pursuing clicks, likes, and retweets. You don't do that.
At the back of this is need to generate revenue. And these are the trends. I understand what you mean. It's clear that the media should drive the agenda, set the agenda, and dictate what the public discuss and what should be on the front burner. But in reality, because of the nature of the economy and the excruciating economic conditions, the media will also think of how to stay alive. You have to be alive first.
That is why
to carry out those functions. And so the profit motive begins to moderate some of their constitutionally guaranteed mandate. What then is the way out?
I think yes, because we have to now restructure media in Nigeria. Some media establishments will, of course, be profit motive, but some media platforms have begun to ask citizens to pitch in what they can, because you can't run media platforms without resources, just like advocacy efficiently with resources. So the people who are ultimate beneficiaries of those things, because these are intangibles, are people like investing in buying and selling, importation, investing in tangibles. But media is
the ones that will make quick
profit. But media, the work you're doing is an intangible asset. You educate the public. It's quite important. And without it, the society cannot work. Even that place that you've called your private businesses, what we do here affects what you do out there. And so if this one is not healthy, don't expect what you're doing to be healthy. That's why you have to invite Nigerians to start pitching in and supporting programs. Even if you're not funding the entire operations of the media platform, you choose selected programs that you can fund, that you can give resources to, that you can donate, and after the program...
As a way of driving change.
As a way of driving change. Today, journalists will have ideas, for instance. I want to go to Sambisa, I want to go to Borno to investigate what happens. Your investigations will take you 3 or 4 months to finish before you can put a report. You don't have the resources to go to Borno to produce that. And if you don't have the resources, you can only wait for a few senators to make press statements. You copy it and paste and call it news, because so I think that Nigeria should get involved in investing in those intangibles.
Let's get back to where we started. The National Assembly, the Senate recently, during their retreat in Akwa Ibom, they said we are going to pursue electoral reforms. On top of the agenda will be to insert electronic transmission of results, move it away from the guidelines into the Electoral Act to make it compulsive to INEC. Just yesterday, they made further disclosures. For instance, they said they will work towards ensuring that judicial challenge of outcome of the election are concluded even before the winners are sworn in. So in the absence of that ideal process leading to electoral reform, we'll have to make do with what we have.
Yes, and then that's why I believe that opposition leaders and opposition platforms should sit up. I said today, whether we like it or not, the Labour Party has overtaken the PDP in momentum. May not be in terms of structure, but in momentum. And so you have your P2B, you have your PDP, Labour Party, and you have your Obedient Movement. I personally see them, and this is my subjective view, as the biggest opposition platform that has the momentum. They should use that momentum well. You should have eggheads there who are looking into these laws and making recommendations. You don't allow the old players to write all the laws, draft all the laws, insert all the loopholes, and then you present yourself in 2027 to run for an election against them with a law that they wrote themselves. You see the problem now. And if you're now getting to the substantive part of the thing, you're not just making it compulsory to use the BVAS, IREV, RBs, and all of these things. What Nigeria has been doing is quite what I call a major national experimentation. If you look at the PR strategy they used to market, and I'll use market advisedly, they used to market the smart card reader.
That's in 2015?
Yes, they said the smart card reader is a game changer. If you Google it, you will still see newspaper reports telling Nigerians.
But it did change the game.
Well, we will look into that shortly. And then today they tell you BVAS is also a game changer, and I don't have issues with these things. But what you're doing is major national experimentation. What you're supposed to do, if you have gotten a device, or devices, you ask yourself, what is the goal of this device? To improve the electoral outcome, to improve the credibility of the process. And then you subject those systems and the processes around the systems to audits and integrity tests. Why do you do these things? To determine the vulnerability of those systems, the possibility or the ability of those systems to be corrupted by individuals. You subject it to those tests because in computing, there is something that is called human interaction with systems. If you have designed a system that is foolproof and you give it to an individual that can corrupt it, that system, has it achieved its purpose? The answer is no. So when you are designing systems, you design processes in mind. And so when INEC comes up with ABIS, any system at all they want to call, right? Nigerians should investigate the system. Nigerians should be interested in auditing the system, seeing all the fault lines
pass
of the
it
system.
through strenuous stress tests.
Yes, it's only when you have achieved this. Card reader did not do that. That was why we didn't know that incident forms would be the undoing of card reader. And then now you have ABIS. In fact, what I believe is that Nigerian politicians are just so brazen. If they are not brazen, what we know about these devices, there are smart ways to technically compromise these systems without you seeing it on the surface. It's just that Nigerian politicians like being brazen about election theft. If not, the way your devices are, people can smartly override the election system without you even knowing. I'll give you one instance, and this is the first time I'm saying it on a national platform. INEC came on this TV station, went around the country telling Nigerians that they have what they call ABIS, Automated Biometric Identification System. And Festus Okoye clearly looked at the camera and told Nigerians that ABIS system will weed out ghost voters, will automatically clean up the voter register, will clean out multiple registrants on the age. You remember that he made those claims. I can tell you today, we are sitting in your studio, INEC does not have one line of code, one smartphone, one phone anywhere called ABIS. What INEC did was that INEC gives an individual that we will leave unnamed for now details of Nigerians in a hard drive. And the guy traveled to Israel, went to Israel, stayed for 2 weeks, and came back and told Nigerians and told INEC that they have cleaned up the system. And then INEC uploaded that thing on their websites. And Nigerians reported 55,000 names. And then INEC took that.
Some of them underaged.
Nigerians, till today, that voter register is still dirty. You have to look at it. And so I'm telling you on your platform, INEC does not have ABIS. And we knew this before the elections. And we told stakeholders, INEC does not have ABIS. If INEC is lying about ABIS, what other things do we not know about the systems? And then we started investigating the electronic devices. If I tell you the several vulnerabilities of this thing you call...
But we have the BVAS that worked about 98, if not more percent. During the last general election. But it was called to question in this last governorship election, where the BVAS was clearly bypassed based on what we can glean from the IREF. We've seen results there still existing in IREF, where, for instance, in some constituencies in Kogi State, for instance, 115 accredited by BVAS, but result posted of about 600. So how do we begin to gauge the performance of BVAS in accreditation and, more importantly, stopping overvoting?
What Nigerians don't know is that there is something called synchronization of the BVAS. Synchronization of the BVAS is not written on INEC guidelines, but INEC knows that it does synchronization. And the synchronization means that BVAS can give you reports. Okay, where you will see synchronization in full effect is in Osun election. If you have followed the Osun Election Petition Tribunal, I think there was overvoting in 774 or something local government, 744 local governments. By the time the BVAS synchronized, you had overvoting in just, I think, at 16 or so local government. You remember?
Yes, sir.
That was why the two leading judgments and dissenting judgments had that issue. So the synchronization of the BVAS is a very fuzzy process. It is not clearly spelled out. So the BVAS can be made to say 2 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. And you don't want to leave that vulnerability.
Numbers they are not constant?
It was not just exploited in 2023 general elections. That was why you could say that it functioned. If it's exploited anytime, beavers can be made to say anything the politicians wanted to say. That's one of the vulnerabilities. The other vulnerabilities you see in the beavers is that the beavers does not measure its own success or fail rate. The beavers does not connect to internet in real time for voter authentication. So, which means that any beaver...
So it's on the spot as preloaded information?
Preloaded. Yes, you understand these things, thankfully. Because a lot of us don't understand it. So you see that the beavers that will be sent to your polling units, if you had 230 voters in your polling unit, they will load the information of 230 voters in your polling unit. If I want to have your polling unit, I know that I will not win in your polling units. I will load the information of 200 people who are not members, who are not voters in your polling units, and add 30 voters who are in your polling unit that day. 200 people will not be able to vote. You only record 30 votes in that polling unit. That's the vulnerability of the systems. And there are several technical ways.
So we have to make the beavers real-time online in such a way as that if there's an accreditation going on at the end server or control station of INEC, they should monitor these processes as they go on.
The technical side, since elections have gone technical or technological, Nigerians must invest in that. The old approach of having your party agents sit around, milling around in quote-unquote collation centers, whereas things are done digitally. Who is the representative of any party in those digital in the server room? None.
Yeah, INEC said they won't give access. And I was one of those that campaigned that representatives of parties should be invited for transparency and openness.
To take a look at, okay, what happened on the presidential election day? Several stories are flying around. One of them is that the server was shut down and the IP was rerouted. And that was why you see that you could upload senatorial results, you could upload House of Reps results, but you couldn't upload election results of presidential election on the... Something happened, and then there is no agent in the room where it happened. And so you have to redesign not just the processes, but then...
And there's been no official explanation
till
from
today,
INEC months after that?
Not even any apologies. What they are asking you to do is to go to courts. And these are some of the vulnerabilities we should have seen before the elections. Thankfully, we have several off-cycle elections. I think in Anambra, in Osun State, Edo State, Ondo State, rather.
And that 2024 will have Edo and Ondo then.
Beautiful.
2025 Anambra comes in.
So you have these three elections, and I'm inviting Nigerian politicians, don't just sit back, invest in the process. Don't sit back and start pasting posters in 2026 against 2027.
Well, let's go for a break. When we come back, we'll stay more with this technology and how foolproof it is and how to make it more foolproof and the roles and responsibilities of the political parties, because the last point you raised is quite very crucial. They don't invest time and resources in managing the processes, being integrated into the processes, and only make some last-minute efforts when it's time for election, and which most times don't pay as much as they should. More on this when we come back from this short break. Do stay with us.
When the issues are critical, germane to Nigeria's democratic process,
politicians can only be seen maybe on television by judges. They should not intermingle, because once you intermingle, then you destroy the systems.
When the personalities are big, important to national discourse.
When you reach certain stage of power and you demonstrate arrogance to the extreme, there's no other thing that will happen to you other than to fall.
When the developments are seemingly complex, confounding like a 1,000-piece jigsaw, that's when we require bold, sound, and analytical minds to help put the pieces together. Jigsaw with Benga Arileba, now showing Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. on AIT. Jigsaw, demystifying the issues.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Chima Christian, a public policy analyst and good governance advocate, has been with me. He's putting recommendations on the table how we can make our electoral system more credible than it is and achieve that dream of having streamless elections that will indeed achieve the purpose of getting leaders that will take Nigeria to greater heights. Thank you so much for staying with us. Let's dwell more on this technology before we move on to other issues. You raised one point I said was crucial, and I've seen comments on that from election observers, even before the last general election, with beavers, which is another game changer, as it were, demonstrated, but we need to do more to protect it for it to achieve its objective. You said beavers does not relay its information real-time online, and there's need for that.
Yes.
INEC ICT department should be encouraged to do this, and if there's need to begin the process of appropriation, the time is now. That is, if INEC consider this necessary to improving our elections.
You're correct, because there are a lot of things, and even in the real time, you see, I'm not advocating for outright dumping of these devices. What I'm asking for is slight upgrade of these devices for it to achieve its desired end goal, which is to make our elections more credible. There are other things you do around the beavers. If you do an audit of Nigeria's voter register, what you see there will marvel you. So the voter register, we have to have a conversation around it. Do we keep this existing voter register?
Do we continue to clean it up? Do we discard and
we
get
don't have the resources to clean it up. Let's just admit. If you see this voter register, and I have it, if you see it, you just see that what line of code are you writing to clean up this data? It's so either we say we have this defective register, we're going to use it and pretend that we're cleaning it up, or we dismantle this and build a new credible voter register. And it will cost resources, but that's a good investment to make.
There's so many doubts and questions around our voters register. Over 18 million, but voter turnout not exceeding 30.
93 million.
93 million, but we'll get under 30 million.
The day you will just take your time to look at the voter register, you will weep for the country. My late father died 7 years ago. He's still on the voter register and are written to INEC. There are several of them. And not just, these are just about deaths alone. Then move on to double registration, fictitious voters. You will see the voter register, you won't see the fingerprints, you won't see the facials. It's there on your foreign names. I believe it was Ikenga who has done something on that.
In some of his constituencies.
So it's everywhere.
That's Ikenga Ogochi.
Yes, it's there. So your voter register is not credible. And I remember telling opposition parties, I say, outside of this brazen theft of elections, if you look at the voter register and you know estimation, you think that you're going to win this election by 2 million votes. I say, if you look at the voter register and you see more than 2 million fictitious names, then those fictitious names could be the game changer. So you had a lot of ways people could compromise the system. It was just that they were brazen and they were arrogant. And so that brings us to the point. What is the political party, opposition political platforms' contribution to this whole thing? Opposition political platforms in Nigeria have always focused on voter mobilization, which is an important aspect of an election. Frying akara on the streets, putting DJs, calling for fields, and using drones to show them my crowd is bigger than your crowd. Voter mobilization, an important aspect of the election. But you're not running for election in Israel. You're not running for election in UAE, or no, not UAE, they don't, in UK or in USA. Right? You are running for elections in Nigeria where the systems have been repeatedly shown to be able to, that people have the capacity to compromise them. That means you have to invest.
Have you put in place mechanisms to check and stop this?
So this is what I was saying before, and even till now, you can't go to the field and be dancing with market women, but you don't have mechanisms in place to protect the votes of the market woman.
That's wasting the...
You are wasting their emotions. You are wasting their investments. People came out, invested their energy. I know people who are still in depression as a result of the elections because you told them that you've won already, whereas you didn't do anything to protect their votes. And you are telling them to protect votes with bare hands. With bare hands.
So you shouldn't be a responsibility passed on to the electorate.
You have some form of responsibility that the electorate has to pass on. But some of the technical issues we are discussing now, the electorate cannot do much about it. So that's at that level you have to, each unit must supply. There is the voter, the parts electorates must play, but then as the leader, you set the template.
And this is the time for the opposition parties to begin to put these processes in place. Good time enough before 2027, but you won't see much action.
What I've seen,
they don't even do an audit of the last election. What happened? What went wrong? How do we stop this? They rarely do it. Rather, you only see activities 1 or 2 years before election, when it's time to sell nomination forms and expression of interest forms.
Some of them
millions and even billions are generated.
Some of them have even started softly campaigning for 2027. I'll give you instances. People are now going around distributing checks of 20 million, 50 million to schools, health colleges, and then at the end of the day, they make sure that cameras are there to capture it. They are just keeping themselves in the news. And periodically, you will see them granting press interviews, doing press-related activities to keep their names in the news. And that's one of the things you need to do. You have to do it. But then don't walk into an election that you're not part of setting the templates. You have failed already. If you did not invest your time in setting the templates, don't believe that miracle will happen, magic will happen, and that people who...
Those that perpetrated manipulation will be more brazen next time.
We know who, for instance, the likely players of 2027 are going to be, and they have a history. And one of the things that I did before 2023 that informed is that I look at, for instance, Tinubu, for instance, what is his history? And what is his age? Everything happening around him shows that this is going to be a very important shot for him. Because if he doesn't get it, wow. And so you will see that in that instance, he has already had a history that we all know. Thankfully, he's been a governor for 8 years. We all know him. Not expecting him to do what he did in 2023 was outright naivety. Outright naivety on the part of many opposition figures.
He was ready?
He was ready.
For 2022.
And people knew that he was ready. And then you are jumping around, jumping from stadium to stadium, snapping pictures with babies. And while he was going to boardroom, doing what he has to do. And so when you blame people or systems that were compromised, you also factor in some blame for people who left our back door open for the goats to come and eat our yam. And that's why I encourage politicians and political platforms and opposition platforms and civil society groups to begin now to invest enough energy. People are discussing electoral reforms now. What is Labour Party contribution to the electoral reform? What is PDP contribution to the electoral reform? What is civil society group contribution to the electoral reform? The candidates...
What are they doing on their own and in unison? Are they engaging the international community on all those?
So you said it right here that you want to invest in the process, right? So the political parties that are serious should have at least asked themselves, how did this water enter the dam? How did this thing happen? And when you have done all the risk analysis and you totally understand what the issues were in 2023, you now begin to put remedial measures or measures in place, not to allow it to repeat. But what happens is that we go to bed, the same thing will happen to us in 2027, and we come back and repeat the same line of crying on TV.
Lamentation. To court and all that. And political parties are supposed to be political machines, as it were. Well organized, closely knit, efficient, but we don't see it here.
I'll tell you the truth. If you've done any long or detailed analysis of these things, you will see that Nigeria is the way it is because the politicians... let me use politicians. Those who want to compromise Nigeria work harder than those who want to make Nigeria good. You will see people, you will see the kind of energy you need to exert to compromise the system. You also see the level of energy you need to exert to prevent people from compromising the system. And you see the people who want to compromise the system exert more influence. Apart from 2014, between 2014 and 2015, Nigeria has never had any opposition at the federal level. Between 1999 and 2013, people were issuing press statements, but there was no credible opposition. Apart from what they somehow did in Ojota in 2012, occupying Nigeria, there was no credible opposition. And when the roles reversed, PDP was nowhere near anything that looks like an opposition party between 2015 and 2023. What the PDP was doing is issuing occasional press statements, granting occasional press interviews, and perhaps tweeting. Today, Labour Party has fallen into that lethargic, lazy opposition of tweeting, press statements, and granting media interviews. How do you think you can grant media interviews and the INEC will be better? How do you think you can grant media interviews and the systems will be cleaned up? How do you think that you can only just do one tweet and all of a sudden the vulnerabilities of the systems will clean up? Who do you expect to do this work if you don't want to do it? And I ask you, people say that he who is pressed should lead the charge. Between the person who is the incumbent and the person who is at the opposition, who should lead the electoral reform? Is it the incumbent or the opposition? Is it not the opposition that should lead the electoral reform?
It will be suicidal for the opposition if it's led by the incumbent.
Because the incumbent...
Or the incumbent party in power.
They will
and that is what we are seeing now.
They will present something that looks like electoral reform, but they will deliberately put landmines there so that when it detonates, everybody is surprised. And that was what they did. And so today, I'm asking opposition platforms to take the charge, to become opposition. This lazy media interview, tweeting, and press statements cannot get Nigeria out of the woods. If Nigeria is going to get out of the woods, the opposition platforms and opposition political figures must be able to roll their sleeve and put in all that is needed. You don't just sit down and...
Is the first step by way of forging a united front? Atiku Abubakar, PDP's candidate, through that open that there is need for a united opposition. Will it be the first step, or is it just uniting for uniting's sake? Would that unity really achieve what you have, what you're prescribing?
Nigeria has not gotten to the stage where it needs unity in opposition. Gambia got to that stage at some point, and the election that produced Yahya Jammeh, as you would know, was a merger of 8 political parties, right? Nigeria has not gone there. You ask yourself, consistently between 1999 and now, what is the difference between the first runner-up and the winner, eventual winner of the elections? It's not much. What is the difference between, for instance, Tinubu that was declared and Atiku and P2B? Atiku, P2B's votes, you see, so you don't have any, it is when you have a complete state capture that you now start talking about measures. Today, PDP on its own stood a great chance of winning that election. Labour Party on its own stood a great chance and could have, and in some instances people say that they won. So, but that's that debatable. But each of those parties has everything it takes to challenge the incumbent meaningfully. So you don't have mushroom parties, right? So I don't support that. But even if you discuss that, what led to the splitter of the PDP? Because of their inability to keep to their own internal constitutions and internal guidelines. Because Atiku was not supposed to run. It was supposed to be a rotational arrangement. And so it was because he ran. So any prescription from Atiku, I will welcome him as an elder statesman. But we also have to weigh things properly. The PDP on its own, as at today, can exert enormous pressure on the system.
If they choose to.
No. The Labour Party also on its own can exert enormous pressure on the system if they choose to. So if they don't choose to do what they should do, whether you bring all of them together and they are all lazy, nothing will change.
Well, let's look at the processes and systems of electioneering, as it were. INEC is supposed to be independent, and a lot of people have said we need to take the power of appointments into INEC position away from the president. The president made some nominations for resident electoral commissioners. The same, using your words, lamentations. Oh, the card carrying members, they address press conference, do it. And at the end of the day, the Senate may likely confirm those appointments. What should we do to INEC to evolve a more independent or truly independent election management body?
I wrote an article called Navigating a Post-Trust Nigeria. And my fundamental argument is that Nigeria is now a post-trust society, where trust, which is an essential component of any functional society, has completely gone out of the window. And you don't just find this with INEC. The same thing you complain about INEC, judiciary, police. Name one institution or arm of government that you can indeed say that Nigerians can trust.
That is insulated from this corruption, weaknesses and all that?
There is none. And then, but only focusing on institutions alone will miss the equation, what is really happening. It's also happening that you cannot trust any component of the Nigerian society. You cannot trust your street lights, for instance. That when it says go, you have to look left and right to be sure that someone running against the traffic is not putting your life in jeopardy. You cannot trust your tailor. You can't say, I have a wedding next weekend that you're picking up your clothes. It can't happen. You have to give them, you have to start pursuing them. You can't even drop your cars at the mechanic today. You have to keep policing them to give your car the attention it needed and to give you. So in a system that you cannot trust, Nigerians, in my view, have found a way to navigate a post-trust society. Because despite the fact that their tailors are not trustworthy, they still show up on the wedding dressing fine, because they harass the tailors, they give the tailors fake dates and all. We have known.
You bring the date forward.
Yes,
for the tailor.
The same thing, we change it for our mechanic people. We follow them. Sometimes, in fact, in Nigeria now, when they replace your parts, they will give you and show you old parts, and even at that. So Nigerians have found a way to get these things to work for us at an individual level. Why don't we do it at the institutional level?
Or a systemic level?
At the systemic level. So why you need it is that these institutions were designed on the fundamental assumptions that they were trustworthy. That was why INEC is supposed to go in, do what they want or what can, and then give us results. The judiciary is also supposed to go in, take their decisions, and give us the outcome. But now that trust has gone out of the window, we will give them our tailored treatment. We will give them the mechanic treatment. Why is this? On the presidential election day, February 25th, 2023, by 14 minutes past 1, INEC was... PM on the election day, as elections were ongoing, INEC was recruiting ad hoc staff in Anambra State. Did not have collation.
How did you reach this conclusion?
And we have the data.
Data from?
We have... it's on record, 14 minutes past 1. We can even give you invitations. INEC sends to people to come. And when they came to Oka office of INEC, they gave them crash orientation and deployed them as what...
On election day?
As what collation officers on election day. I am saying this on your platform, and INEC can come. Let's engage on this. By 14 minutes past 1. So you don't just leave INEC to hire ad hoc staff. We have to investigate to be sure that they hired all of them.
There are several allegations of politicians, the politicians influencing who INEC hires as collation officers, electoral officers, and all that.
Beautiful. Then you've also seen these officers come on the election day, and you see that they don't know how to manipulate the beavers. So you also want to investigate and invest yourself in the training processes so that somebody does not write off the money for the training and then churn out poorly trained people or untrained people. You will say the same thing. So not just will you sit back and INEC tells you, we have acquired Abyss, the election is a game changer, you believe them. We have recruited 1 million Nigerians for it, you believe that. No, you don't just do that. You give them your... That's why I invite Nigerians to radically invest themselves in policing our institutions. In policing, we can no longer go to sleep. We can no longer hold them responsible. Like INEC cannot give you a word and you can take it to the bank today. So when they give you a word, Americans say trust, but verify.
The chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmood, and of course the National Commissioner in charge of voter education and publicity variously promised that IREV will be functional, but that day perhaps the glitch came.
That's why we have now not to rely on promises alone. If you tell us you are recruiting ad hoc staff, media, civil society, political parties...
What are the processes?
Yes, what are the processes? It should be spelled out. If you say that you have devices, investigations, anything you say, we will believe you only after we have subjected your claims to verification.
So what you're saying in effect is that we shouldn't be running after these different institutions and structures. So let's make INEC independent. Let's make the judiciary dispense justice. It should be a collective thing of changing the society so that the institutions of the society will align with the new development. Is that your argument?
My argument is that trust has broken out. And since you can no longer trust, you have to start doing things, taking extra precautions. Like you buy drugs over the counter, you have to weigh it and you have to look at it because you know that it's...
You have to send a code to a phone number.
Beautiful.
A NAVDAC phone number to confirm its authenticity.
So if INEC makes a claim, you have to send a code to make sure that the claim is authentic. I've told you that INEC today does not have Abyss. And INEC told Nigerians they have. They don't. And that's why you don't want to take their claims or their promises for anything. Their promises are not worth anything. The value of the Naira is even much more than the value of INEC promises. That's why you have to invest yourself in the process of authenticating all claims. And I will leave you with this. When we say about INEC, you can take that same exact thing and say it about the National Population Commission. They've said that they've acquired geospatial devices, they've acquired PDAs. This is the first census to fried rice that Nigerians will ever have. All of those claims, we take them, but we should investigate those claims. And we are saying we've taken our time to look at the systems and some of the processes, not all. And we found several vulnerabilities. That is in my own view now, that if Nigerians don't intervene, the next census will even be worse than the 2023 elections.
And sometimes the police will tell us we are deploying 30,000. We don't verify or authenticate how many that we actually deploy.
The media has to do its work.
Well, beyond the media, it will heaping all this responsibility on the media.
Not just the media, all of us.
It's a societal issue. Different stakeholders doing their bit. The political class, progressive, change-minded politicians also joining. This is a collective that we need to achieve results. Sometime one day we may get you here to get more. He talked about the census and the need to get it right before. We'll create time for that to indeed get more interrogation of the system to ensure that taxpayers' money work for the taxpayers, and indeed what are promised is what should be delivered. Thank you so much, Chima Christian. public policy analyst, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you also for being part of it. My name is Amechi Anapwe. Have a good time.